In the most guarded halls of the palace, even rumors hold weight. A stunning, emotional fall by Princess Anne and Prince William has left insiders terrified. And why? Louis the Prince. However, there is more to this startling exhibition than meets the eye. What did they know? What have they been concealing? And why now? Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve further into what this actually implies for the royal family. It began without warning. A high-level conference at Clarence House, intended to be regular, slid into pandemonium when Princess Anne, noted for her steadfast composure, abruptly rose up, obviously distressed, and left the room in tears. The tension was immediate, and her unexpected leaving sent ripples of uncertainty and fear among those present. Within moments, Prince William followed. Eyewitnesses say he hesitated at the doorway, his face pale and unreadable, before turning away from the gathering and disappearing down the corridor. Senior assistants made an effort to keep everything in order, but the energy in the room had transformed drastically. Something far more profound than royal procedure had been impacted by whatever had just transpired. Speaking under the condition of anonymity, one employee reported hearing Anne's shaky speech just before she departed. It has to do with Louis. The senior advisors went into a panic after hearing that one sentence. And before anyone could ask further questions, the room was evacuated. Damage control was underway in a matter of hours. Memoranda from within were distributed. Staff were ordered to remain silent. All scheduled press briefings were canceled. And a wall of royal silence dropped as the world's media began to learn about odd happenings behind palace walls. However, quiet only encourages conjecture. And when Catherine, Princess of Wales, neglected to show up for a public charity function for which she had been confirmed for a long time, conjecture swiftly gave way to suspicion. No statement was given, no apology made, just a blank slot where the future queen should have been. Behind the palace facade, the pressure was rising. The abrupt changes in behavior alarmed royal insiders more and more as the public attempted to solve the puzzle. William's unusually detached demeanor, his reserved demeanor, his extended periods of solitude, and his reluctance to talk about what had happened were all noted by aides close to the family. Buckingham Palace remained stone-faced, releasing only a generic answer that cited personal affairs. However, nobody purchased it. Not after witnessing the most orderly member of the royal family, Anne, so clearly fall apart. Not after hearing that single terrifying remark, "It has to do with Louis." Thus, one eerie query started to reverberate through both hidden passageways and headlines as cameras clicked and reporters talked. Not through the official channels. From the very heart of a country that had witnessed a small child grow up under a crown of expectation. Not from royal spokespersons. As the world speculates, one question remains unanswered by the press, but screamed inside palace walls. What happened to Prince Louis? Prince Louis was never meant to inherit the crown, or so the world thought. But beneath the veneer of regal heritage lies a concealed truth. One that might disrupt the line of succession itself, and only a handful of royals have known since the day he was born. The story began softly behind shuttered doors and unreadable expressions. An intelligence operative, who disappeared from public records a few days later, allegedly hand-delivered a sealed dossier to Charles III on the night of Louis's birth. The document was marked with a terrifying inscription, "For monarch's eyes only." Although its contents have never been verified, palace insiders claim that Charles's attitude changed that evening. He postponed phone calls, canceled meetings, and stayed by himself till dawn. Those closest to the scene would subsequently speak of a prophecy, something old, unspoken, and sacred. An old legend connected to the youngest son of a future queen was hinted to by whispers in the royal hallways, a child born into something ancient, perilous, and even prophetic, in addition to privilege. That prophecy, according to one unsubstantiated leak, warns of a child who would inherit not just a title, but a responsibility. one who would uphold the spirit that once inspired Diana, Princess of Wales, the legacy of vision and revolt. It wasn't a matter of bloodline alone. There was more to it, something to be afraid of. Princess Anne, ever the stoic, was pulled into the circle within days. During a private trip from Balmoral to Sandringham, a briefing tailored just for her eyes was given. By the time she returned to London, aides stated her face had gone pale and chilly. She didn't speak to anyone for hours. One courtier expressed it simply: stone-cold horror. Shortly after, something unprecedented happened. Louis's list of godparents was surreptitiously amended. The original choices, widely speculated upon in the press, were never formally confirmed. Instead, a new circle evolved, discreet, distant from royal history, and constrained by a secrecy agreement that surprised even seasoned legal advisors. There was no explanation, but the signal was clear. Louis was to be handled differently than any other child of royalty. William, meantime, started to evolve. He grinned in public, but behind palace walls there were hints of something unraveling. He started withdrawing from family gatherings, avoiding unplanned interviews, and assigning more parental tasks to Catherine, who herself grew very protective. His abrupt mood swings and growing dependence for solitude were seen by close friends. One family insider said, "He carries something heavy. He won't even tell his brother about it." And then there was Louis himself. His absence became more difficult to overlook over time. One by one, big royal ceremonies passed without his presence. A coronation rehearsal follows a state wedding and a family jubilee. Each time, the explanation was identical. He's focusing on school. But whispers told a different story. Staff who worked closely with the children reported sudden constraints surrounding Louis's timetable. He was transported between households at unusual hours. Certain rooms were restructured. One aide overheard a phone call between William and a high-ranking advisor. Time is running out. He's displaying signs sooner than predicted. Those closest to the truth began to worry if the crown could contain what was coming. They wanted to postpone the reckoning, to hide the warnings with titles and ceremonies. However, the prophecy, real or imagined, was coming to pass. Although the prophecy was kept a secret, a startling event forced the royal family to confront the horrific repercussions of secrecy. Screams reverberated across Windsor to begin. The royal family's terrifying stillness, frantic phone calls, and an emergency lockdown ensued. That night signaled the beginning of the unraveling. Prince Louis had done something no one could explain, save those who already knew. It was meant to be a quiet evening. Just family, don't press, no protocol, no titles, only blood. The kind of meeting that was rare, but required amid times of turmoil. But something went horribly wrong. At exactly 8:47 p.m., according to internal security logs, Windsor Castle's southwest wing was sealed down without warning. Doors are closed, staff relocated, communications confined to encrypted lines. It wasn't a drill, and it wasn't a mistake. The cause of the lockdown is still mostly unknown. But what leaked out told a deeper tale. Prince Louis was found alone in the royal music room, immobile, eyes open, absolutely unresponsive. It was called a dissociative trance by one employee. He appeared to be completely absent from the room, according to another. But Louis's illness wasn't the only thing that scared everyone. It was what surrounded him. Two aides claimed to have seen writings on the wall that no one could understand, books ripped from their shelf, and a broken picture of Queen Elizabeth. Even seasoned guards were hesitant to enter the area because of the strange markings, which were ancient and almost ritualistic. The room felt colder than the rest of the castle. Something unimaginable seems to have happened, and whatever it wasn't over. The most chilling part? Emergency services weren't called. Instead, Princess Anne was. She arrived within 20 minutes, untidy, breathless, but deadly quiet. It was evident she had been briefed. She didn't inquire what had happened. She went directly to Louis. She knelt near him, spoke in a whisper, and waited. And then Louis blinked quietly. However, he remained silent. Then came William. He stormed into the corridor moments later, demanding explanations, enraged that protocol had been disregarded. He felt something break inside him as he saw Anne with Louis. Witnesses claim loud comments and raised voices. William was accused by Anne of being overly patient. William shouted that no one told him the truth. The dispute intensified until both were crying. Two of the most powerful people in the monarchy, brought to their knees by an uncontrollable secret. Royal assistants were observed escorting Queen Camilla out of the house. She didn't talk to the workers or make eye contact, but many who observed her said that she had a terrified expression on her face. She held her chest tightly, as if physically nauseated. One whispered to another, "She knows. She's seen it before." And then came the line that would shake the foundation of what little lucidity remained. A senior palace advisor stopped outside the sealed door, turned to a colleague and murmured, "It's happening again?" Exactly like they stated. Nobody inquired about the meaning of that. Nobody had to. Whatever happened in the room wasn't brand new. Something darker was repeated, buried deep in royal history, older. And now, it had returned. Whatever transpired that evening wasn't a singular incident. It was the breaking point in a pattern that had troubled the family for years. They still whisper her name in the palace's quiet nooks. Diana, Princess of Wales, may be gone, but her influence continues. And now, Prince Louis is being linked to the precise patterns that formerly plagued her. Was this merely history repeating, or something darker? Diana's memory is more than just sentimental, it is spiritual. Her legacy is not a chapter the monarchs closed, it is a wound they never fully healed. And now it appears that wound is bleeding again through the actions, the presence, and the unexplainable upheaval around her grandson. Prince Louis is doing more than simply repeating Diana's history. He is awakening something the family had buried long ago. The psychological linkages are uncanny. Diana was prone to extended silences and intense emotional outbursts when she was younger, vivid dreams she was unable to describe. People who knew her well were afraid of what they referred to as her other world. Louis is now showing similar trends, withdrawal episodes, descriptions of voices, emotional spikes that come without warning. And most troubling of all, like Diana, an unwavering sensitivity to the ulterior motives of others. In a private moment, William apparently told Princess Anne something that chilled her. "I see Mum in him. Not only her eyes, she is depressed." He spoke it with a weighty quietness, one that implied more than nostalgia. It hinted at terror. Anne, already on edge from what she watched at Windsor, realized this wasn't coincidence. There was a deeper, recurring element here. Then came the stories, persistent and buried, but impossible to ignore, that Diana had previously recorded a second series of tapes, not the well-known ones concerning her royal life or marriage, but a secret set. These recordings purportedly discussed her dreams. Not fantasies, but warnings. She talked of having vivid, frequently frightening visions of her grandchildren, especially a boy who would show up with the fire she was never permitted to let out. The pieces started to fit together after Anne's personal journals were discovered. Written in cryptic entries, they cited Diana's warning many times. She said the line would skip was all that was written in one passage. "Go to the boy who was born last." I didn't believe her. Now I do. These statements were affirmations rather than reflections. According to a royal historian who was acquainted with Diana's mental state, she had long felt that her legacy was incomplete, that when the monarchy least anticipated it, it would infect the younger heirs instead of the older ones. According to the historian, she was afraid the fire would reappear, and not via disobedience, but through intuition. Catherine's role in all this cannot be disregarded. Once perceived as the calm, polished future queen, her quiet throughout the unfolding catastrophe is now viewed in a new perspective, not as weakness, but as a shield. A mother protecting something far more deadly than scandal. A child bearing the emotional baggage of a lady who resisted the system. Thus, Diana's shadow has reappeared. Not through mystery, not through remembrance, not through tribute, via a young man who perceives what others ignore. The monarchy is trying desperately to suppress people by asking questions. The family was plagued by emotional shadows, but something much more explosive, a betrayal hidden in royal archives, was what ignited the actual flame. A code term buried in royal intelligence files, a clandestine operation designed to keep the monarchy safe at any costs, and at the core of everything, a child named Louis. When Princess Anne realized the truth, it broke everything she believed about duty and about the family she had spent her life protecting. Operation Seraphim. Few inside the palace had ever heard the word, and fewer yet understood what it signified. It was an unseen system put in place to handle challenges to the monarchy itself rather than the country, and it was intended to be employed only in times of extreme crisis. It didn't answer to Parliament. MI5 was not notified. It was older than people realized, locked deep beneath royal archives, and preserved by generations of rulers who feared one thing more than any public scandal: a fracture from within. Prince Louis had been highlighted in a confidential psychological evaluation at the age of 4. The data, never published to the public, suggested anomalies, odd cognitive processes, remarkable sensitivity to emotional energy, and episodes that scientists secretly dubbed preconscious breakdowns. In layman's terms, something they couldn't describe. The report was buried, not thrown away, instead of being investigated further, marked with the insignia of Operation Seraphim and ordered sealed by royal command. Without Princess Anne, it would have remained hidden indefinitely. Haunted by what she witnessed at Windsor, she began digging. Not via gossip, but through actual files. She was completely shocked by what she discovered. Louis's restricted file was often accessed according to logs. But the names associated to those logs weren't child psychologists or royal medical staff. They had no business being near a child's records because they were intelligence analysts. Anne confronted the palace's internal security section and demanded answers. She received none, only more quiet. But the magic of silence had faded. Up until then, William had been carefully contained, but now he exploded. He went straight to Charles III and wanted to know why data about his son had been sealed under clandestine authority, why his own access as a father had been restricted, and why no one had notified him Louis was being watched. The conflict between father and son was believed to be explosive. No titles, no diplomacy, just wrath and treachery. William accused Charles of letting the crown overcome its own blood. Charles, clearly startled, provided simply explanation rather than denial. You don't grasp what's at stake. Queen Camilla, constantly present but rarely central, became a focus of suspicion. She may have shielded Charles from family criticism, according to some accounts. Camilla was said to have convinced William that everything was under control and to have kept Anne at bay for months. But now that the truth was pouring through, the family's protective armor was beginning to break, and understood that they required leverage support in addition to blood. She began quietly reaching out to former allies, retired military generals, legal advisors, once loyal to Elizabeth II, even a member of the aristocracy with access to the Church of England's internal records. Her aim was simple: build enough pressure to persuade the palace to go public before Louis became a prisoner of secrecy. But there was no time. More quickly than they could push them down, the walls were closing in. Because even as Anne and William prepared to speak, Prepared to reveal the falsehood, palace operatives moved rapidly. The leaks were located. They discredited their allies. And instead of receiving a retort, the two senior royals with impeccable reputations were humiliated. But before Anne and William could go public, they were stopped and silenced in the most humiliating way imaginable. The monarchy retaliated just as they were about to speak. What followed was a meticulously coordinated campaign of silencing, from cancelled privileges to psychological intimidation. William and Anne sacrificed their voices in order to be loyal to the monarchy. The silence did not come with rage. Like fog creeping in through the crevices, it arrived silently. The instruments of control started to tighten around them one by one. Publicly, nothing seemed amiss. Events were attended and smiles were maintained. However, the pressure was constant behind the scenes. The first to be sidelined was Princess Anne. A number of significant appointments, some of which were scheduled months in advance, were abruptly rescheduled. The rationale given? Fatigue. However, some close to her claimed that she was just taken off the stage by force and wasn't ill or exhausted. Prince William, meanwhile, remained visible. But what the cameras captured was simply surface. While he was acclaimed for his steadiness and leadership, his inner circle saw a dramatic difference. He was no longer talking, withdrawn, frequently inaccessible. According to a longtime friend, he looks lost, like he's standing in a room full of people and no one can hear him scream. The concerted messaging about Prince Louis became oddly rehearsed. He was regarded as prospering, content, and involved in his studies and statements given to the media. Yet, no new photographs were released, no public appearances, no unscripted situations. When a reporter inquired about his condition during a foreign tour, William offered just a stiff smile and shifted the subject. Every motion was measured, every word filtered. Behind the curtain, more fissures formed. Anne's devoted aides started to disappear. A few quit. Some were transferred to unrelated departments. It was described as a quiet purge by one insider. People who disagreed with the story were excluded. Revocation of access. Invitations rescinded. The message was plain: fall away or fall in line. Then the leak appeared. A series of internal emails between Anne and a trusted staff member found their way to a foreign journalist. The information was terrible. "They've made us prisoners," Anne stated in one communication. "I do longer recognize my own family." Another expressed her worry that the monarchy was prioritizing self-preservation over the truth. "We are no longer duty guardians. We protect a gate that we no longer trust." For his part, William started confiding in the few people who had not yet abandoned him. "They'll take him away if we push too hard," he reportedly acknowledged in an interview with a former university acquaintance. That worry of losing his son to a system that regarded him as a threat was paralyzing. He was unable to advance or retreat. He was stuck. The crown had fulfilled its intended purpose: protect itself at all costs. However, in doing so, it caused harm to the same people who had vowed to defend it. And as Anne and William attempted to cling on, to remain collected, it became increasingly evident they were facing an enemy that bore their family's name. But even under great pressure, the dam couldn't hold forever, for the truth was never theirs to control. It belonged to the youngster at the center of it all. The adults didn't break the stillness. Which was the most surprising turn of events. It was the boy himself. With words that astonished even his parents, Prince Louis gave voice to what they had all been too terrified to say, and his message changed everything. For months, his name had resonated behind closed doors, shrouded in tension, anxiety, and silence. Every decision made by the palace had circled around him, yet no one had asked him how he felt. Nobody ventured. Up until the point when there was no other option. In a private family therapy session aimed to diffuse the growing emotional crisis, Louis spoke. What came out wasn't infantile misunderstanding or a scream for attention, it was clarity, unprocessed, strong, and impossible to ignore. The therapist had asked a straightforward question. Louis, how does it make you feel when others mention you? There was a long delay. Why do they keep calling me dangerous? The youngster asked, looking up without hesitation. The room froze. William snapped, yet he had been holding himself together like a strained rope. He sobbed in public. The weight of an uncontainable truth was causing his body to collapse. Princess Anne, unshakable, was on the other side of him. Anne stood up and silently walked away. She remained silent. She didn't turn around. The tears in her eyes revealed all, but Louis wasn't finished. He went on. His speech was soft, but eerily serene. He asked, "Who is Diana?" And when the therapist started to explain, Louis interrupted. "I already know. Sometimes she comes to me, nobody said anything. There was no explanation, no planned statement, just quiet. Aside from the sound of something ancient and unseen exploding, the adults had battled to keep him safe. Yet in doing so, they had made him feel like a menace. The forced distance, the infinite whispers, the meticulous manipulation of his presence, it had influenced the way he regarded himself. He wasn't only carrying their secrets. He was a victim of their terror. And everything changed at that instant. Like a tidal wave, the revelation surged across the room. And everything changed at that instant. Like a tidal wave, the revelation surged across the room. The crown, in its endeavor to safeguard him, had created a cage around him, and Louis had merely unlocked the door with a few straightforward, heartbreaking words without any anger or tears. Days later, the family appeared together in a quiet public engagement, and dressed in black. Quiet protest, not grief. Normally composed, William strolled with his head lowered. For the first time in months, Catherine clung to Louis's hand. And Louis? He remained silent. He didn't have to, because just those few words, he had changed everything. Via truth, not via disobedience or controversy. The truth of a youngster. The kind that the monarchy could no longer ignore, but wasn't prepared to confront. And as Louis found his voice, the walls of quiet began to shatter, one secret at a time. The recordings, designated for destruction, were kept for more than 20 years in an estate vault. But when they surfaced, they shattered the palace's last line of defense. In those, Diana disclosed all. And Louis was the subject of the most startling forecast of them. The leak erupted without notice, without accumulation. The Globe was debating Louis's eerie query at one point. The next, a foreign journalist received a telegram from an unidentified nobleman that would start a media frenzy. The third set is mine, Diana's true farewell. The tapes were allegedly the last recordings Diana made before she passed away, but they were never broadcast or acknowledged. These weren't about her marriage. Confessions were not what they were. They served as cautions. Diana spoke calmly inside the cassettes, as if she had come to terms with the possibility that her truth would never be revealed. She made reference to names. She made mention of symbols. But what stopped the Globe cold was a terrifying remark repeated several times. The child born into flames. She never stated Louis's name. She didn't have to, though. The descriptions were overly detailed. A boy who was not yet born when the recording was made. A child who would bear the sorrow she was unable to let go of. The one who, in her words, would be feared most by those closest to him. In one section, she addressed Anne directly. A message meant for a sister-in-law who, at the time, hardly comprehended what Diana was going through. "Anne, you'll notice it before the others," Diana remarked. "When no one else will, he will come to you. You mustn't silence him. You mustn't shield the crown from him. You have to keep the crown away from him." The cassette made a crackling sound, unaltered, and unprocessed. As Diana spilled out a reality too frail for the institution, she'd tried to flee. Within hours after the disclosure, global networks confirmed the tape's validity. Independent specialists validated the voice. What about the timestamps? The place? Everything checked out. Suddenly, the story transformed. This was no longer about a stressed-out family or a child acting strangely. This was about a prophecy, one foretold by a woman the monarchy had tried to eradicate from its heritage. William remained silent. He canceled his appearances. All media access was denied by his aides. However, it was verified behind closed doors that he had listened to the entire set of cassettes, alone. He didn't sleep for 2 nights after that, according to insiders. When questioned, he would only respond, "It changes everything." Anne's representative released a one-line statement. Briefly, begin. Piercing. She was always aware. It was neither confirmation nor denial. But it said volumes. Diana had left a thread, and now the world had yanked on it only to watch the entire tapestry of royal illusion begin to unravel. The crown's final line of silence broke in an instant. The secrets they had concealed, the child they had concealed, the warnings they had ignored. The woman's voice exposed everything. They were never able to be completely silent. The last twist would come from a decision taken in the present rather than from the past. But now the world understood what the family had battled so hard to conceal. After secrets are revealed and the monarchy is rocked, Prince William makes a choice that shakes the kingdom. The future has been altered by the truth of one child, and not everyone in the palace will live to see what happens next. The moment arrived in a softly delivered statement, sent to all major outlets simultaneously, rather than through a news conference or official broadcast. Prince William, heir to the throne, declared a temporary absence from public obligations, claiming the need to prioritize his family's well-being, notably his youngest son. The subtext was immediately apparent by everyone. This has nothing to do with moving away. This had to do with drawing a line in blood. The monarchy had taken a chance on concealment. It had gambled its survival on silence. William, however, had witnessed it almost lose him his son. He was no longer prepared to pay that price. His decision sent tremors through Parliament, the press, and the public. It was a first, and yet, to those who had followed the storm, it was inevitable. Princess Anne did the same a few days later. She stood resigned from crucial ceremonial and military responsibilities, releasing a statement laden with veiled resistance. According to her, there comes a time when duty needs to be reinterpreted for the sake of truth, rather than tradition. It was the first, and not the last, public recognition of a rift within the royal stronghold. Like wildfire, speculation broke out. Who would leave if William took a step back, even for a short while? What would happen of the line of succession? Could the monarchy afford to lose not just its next king, but its most stable face? Rumors swirled. Some murmured of Edward. Some dared to speak of a regency. The palace provided no clarification, and none of it was verified. Meanwhile, Louis was discreetly relocated overseas, with no information provided. His guardianship was entrusted to a private group of experts, not expelled, but protected, not hidden, but sheltered. For the first time in years, he was away from the royal walls that had both imprisoned and defined him. Then came the most disturbing sight of all, Queen Camilla leaving the castle through a hidden exit, eyes downcast, clearly upset. Nothing to say. The quiet of a woman who had battled to protect a world that was now collapsing around her, without any explanation. The crown reacted with a single sentence, one line, chilly, measured, immovable. The family will prevail. But by then, no one believed it. The illusion of invincibility had vanished, but not in the way they had previously. Because what had unraveled wasn't just scandal, it was a legacy. It was the assumption that bloodlines alone could guard from truth. The strength was in that silence. Pain could be erased by that obligation. But even as the crown seeks to restore, the world has glimpsed what lurks underneath the gilded brilliance: a family in danger, bound not only by obligation but also by suffering. I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.